When love requires a complete character transplant, when you throw away your own identity and your safety just to be near the person you worship, what happens when that object of affection, a handsome, wealthy shipping magnate, is not only blind and heartbroken, but is plotting a meticulous, slow-burn psychological war against the very person you claim to be?
It's the ultimate setup for narrative tension, isn't it? It's all built on this foundation of just desperate, pure deception.
Absolutely.
We are diving deep today into the dramatic and, I have to say, surprisingly dark heart of an Eagle Swooped. And trust me, while it lives in the realm of classic romance sagas, the psychological complexity and the high emotional stakes here, they punch far above their weight class.
They really do. Our source material here is this fascinating case study in how far self-sacrifice can push a person. Our heroine, Tessa Blaine, has been hopelessly devoted to the Greek magnate, Paul Demetrius, since the day she introduced him to her sister.
Oh, and that sister Lucinda.
Yes, Lucinda,
Yeah.
the beautiful, selfish ghost hanging over this entire story.
She's the classic, lovely young goddess with pale gold hair and eyes like cornflowers, pure external perfection. Paul was completely captivated, and Tessa, who's the quieter, more sensible sister, she felt she had to disappear.
So she went into a self-imposed exile for 2 years.
2 years. She was convinced they would marry, and she just couldn't bear to watch their happiness.
But the happy ending?
Ah,
It never happened. The central tragedy is that Paul suffered this horrific accident, which we soon learned was caused by Lucinda. He's left incurably blind, his hands are severely disfigured, and he's living as a recluse in the mountains of Cyprus.
And Lucinda, naturally, she throws him over for a man who isn't disabled.
Of course.
And this is where Tessa makes her impossible choice. Where Lucinda sees ruin and disfigurement, Tessa sees an opportunity for devotion. She commits the ultimate betrayal, impersonating her beautiful sister, traveling all the way across the Mediterranean, begging Paul's forgiveness as Lucinda, and then marrying him.
So our mission, therefore, is not just to summarize this plot, but to really analyze the psychological mechanisms at work here. We're unpacking Tessa's desperate choice to assume Lucinda's identity, and crucially, the dark, almost Gothic twist that transforms their marriage, the very thing she risked everything for, into a high-stakes arena of hidden intentions and Paul's slow, deliberate revenge.
And it raises the ultimate question for us, I think. Can love survive being weaponized?
Okay, so our journey starts with Tessa's return home. She's coming back after 2 years of what the text calls wandering, which is this lengthy, self-imposed exile that spanned Germany, Turkey, Lebanon, and Greece. She really got around.
She did, and she did it all to escape. She was expecting to come back to wedding bells, to the news that Paul and Lucinda were finally married.
Instead, she gets a shockwave of devastation.
Oh, it's brutal. Paul and Lucinda aren't just unmarried. Lucinda has completely thrown him over and is cheerfully engaged to a very nice boy named Gerald.
Gerald, who conveniently adores her and isn't blind.
Exactly. And Paul, meanwhile, is described as incurably blind due to this accident. And for Tessa, who remembers him as this specimen of physical perfection, perfect in body, she just finds this fate unbearable.
This immediately forces us, and her, to look at the critical contrast between the sisters, which is just foundational to understanding Tessa's monumental insecurity and her eventual, her audacity.
It really is. Lucinda is the definition of external beauty and internal emptiness.
A lovely young goddess.
Yes, but her self-worth is entirely linked to being observed. Her reaction to Paul's blindness perfectly encapsulates her narcissism. She asks, and you can just hear the genuine confusion in her voice, "What's the use of looking like this if you can't be seen?"
I mean, that one line tells you everything you need to know about her.
Everything. This woman views her physical appearance as a tool, and if the tool cannot be admired, it holds no value to her or to anyone else in her mind.
And Tessa, on the other hand, she performs this brutal self-assessment in the mirror, judging herself so harshly against Lucinda's gold standard.
It's painful to read. She sees the similarities, the high cheekbones, a similar mouth. But she believes she lacks that indefinable thing that makes Lucinda's face beautiful. She notes her own widely spaced, honest brown eyes and this lovely, deep, honey-colored hair, but she still fixates on flaws. She's wondering what difference it would make if her nose were to be turned up, not quite so much.
And this self-doubt isn't just internal, is it? It's been validated by Paul himself.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the devastating part. The source reveals this flashback where Tessa overhears Paul talking about her. He scoffed, calling her that tiresome sister of Lucinda's, and he questioned why she was so desperate for attention from men.
And then he adds this incredibly cruel line.
He does. He says contemptuously that her eyes were the only thing she can use, for she has nothing else to recommend her.
Wow. Just casual cruelty from the man you already idolize. That creates a profound emotional scar.
He effectively told her she was worthless, except for her eyes. Exactly, and that rejection is critical because it explains why Tessa believes the only way she can achieve happiness is by erasing herself completely and adopting the identity Paul did love.
But the real catalyst, the thing that sparks the plan, isn't just her own desire, is it? It's something Lucinda tells her.
It is. It's Paul's reported reaction to Lucinda dumping him. Lucinda, in her usual shallow way, relays the story of the breakup. Paul, she says, acted incredulous, and then he declared that if she ever changed her mind and asked his forgiveness, he would take me back.
And Lucinda just sees that as arrogance.
She dismisses it completely. Self-conceit, she calls it.
But Tessa
processes this through the lens of pure, idealized love. She sees this not as Paul's arrogance, but as immense, eternal devotion. This man, despite the betrayal, despite the subsequent ruin of his life, still holds the door open. She actually tells Lucinda, he must love you very much to be able to forgive what you've done to him.
And that promise of forgiveness becomes the entire, very risky basis of Tessa's plan. It's a profound moment of psychological projection, isn't it?
Totally. She projects her own deep capacity for forgiveness and devotion onto Paul's feelings for Lucinda. In her mind, if Paul is just waiting for an apology to heal, well, she'll deliver it, even if it requires a complete identity shift.
She's trying to mend Paul's broken heart, not just win her own.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that conviction drives her impulsive leap. Paul is now a recluse in the mountains of Cyprus. So Tessa tells her father she has to go find him, driven by this deep, almost spiritual necessity. She just says, I must find Paul.
And she makes her father promise to keep her journey a secret from her mother, which further isolates her. It ensures that no one can talk her out of this high-risk deception. So before Tessa even sets foot in Paul's isolated villa, she needs to find him. She seeks out his friend Joe, claiming she just needs the address in Cyprus.
Right, a simple errand, supposedly. But Joe becomes this crucial informant because he completely tears down the carefully constructed, self-serving narrative Lucinda has always maintained about the accident.
This is a devastating moment of truth for Tessa.
It really is. Lucinda had told their father that Paul was just driving too fast and became unconscious, a tragic but simple accident. But Joe reveals the cold, hard facts, and he confirms Lucinda knew the truth all along because he had told her everything.
And the truth is, it's just damning for Lucinda.
Completely. The crash wasn't accidental speeding. It happened because Paul confronted Lucinda over her infidelity. She was playing around with some bloke while he was away on business.
And they were arguing.
A huge argument. And Lucinda, in this fit of rage and described as totally unrepentant for her actions, she tried to seize control of the car. When Paul refused to stop, she lost her temper and viciously wrenched at the wheel.
She caused the crash.
She was the agent of destruction. The vehicle overturned, hit a dry stone wall, and immediately burst into flames.
Okay, so this confirms Lucinda's moral callousness. But the details that follow, the details about Paul's injury, they give the story its true, wrenching depth. It highlights the profound sacrificial nature of his initial love for Lucinda.
A love that Tessa is now hoping to inherit. Joe relates this horrific account from a witness. Paul had actually been flung clear of the car. He was initially sighted and safe.
So he was okay at first.
He was. But seeing the car blazing, he immediately believed Lucinda was still trapped inside. The witness described Paul as being like a man demented at the idea of his loved one being burned alive. This wasn't rational thought. It was the ultimate instinctive sacrifice.
He literally flung himself at the blazing vehicle and clawed like a madman at the door, calling Lucinda's name over and over again.
His hands were literally on fire, which resulted in the severe, permanently discolored burns we hear about. Burns that Tessa will later have to learn to touch and cherish.
And the most profound irony
is that Lucinda was never in the car. She was also thrown clear and only suffered minor injuries. Paul's frantic, sacrificial act was for nothing. And the blindness.
It wasn't physical?
No. It wasn't the fire or the impact. It was the shock at the idea of Lucinda's being burned to death. His physical ruin was a direct measure of his profound, eternal love for Lucinda at that moment.
So Tessa is now stepping into the shoes of a woman whose perceived worthiness led Paul to commit self-immolation. She's replacing a woman who commanded and received the ultimate sacrifice.
Only to be immediately abandoned by her.
And Lucinda's coldness just confirms her utter selfishness. Joe affirms she was totally unrepentant for causing the crash.
Yeah, and that detail that she couldn't bear his touch, I could never bear him to touch me because of his burned hands, is just bone-chilling. It shows Paul was loved only so long as he remained aesthetically perfect.
This knowledge has to strengthen Tessa's resolves, right? She's not just performing a deception now. In her mind, she's actively providing the devotion Lucinda denied him.
Exactly. She feels justified. She's repaying a terrible emotional and physical debt on her sister's behalf because, in her eyes, Lucinda forfeited her right to this man's immense love.
Yeah.
So, armed with this heavy, heavy knowledge, Tessa arrives in Cyprus, and she immediately commits fully to the deception. She introduces herself as Lucinda to absolutely everyone.
To the young man, Martin, she meets on the ship. To Marula, the hotel proprietor in Belopais. There is no turning back now.
Not at all. And the setting of Paul's exile is so beautifully evoked. It's this remote white villa high in the mountains above Belopais Abbey. The garden is filled with these overwhelming sensory details. Fragrant roses, carnations, hibiscus, the heady, almost cloying scent of lemon blossom.
All this sensory richness that emphasizes precisely what Paul, the wealthy, proud man, cannot experience. It really sets up Tessa's self-appointed role as his eyes and his conduit to the world.
It does. So she walks up this dusty track and finds Paul standing framed in the doorway. He's tall, lean, and dark. And despite the glaze of blindness over his eyes, they still possess that familiar, devastating depth. But then she sees his hands.
The discolored, severely burned hands.
Evidence of his incredible suffering, and it shocks Tessa to the core.
She is so overwhelmed by his affliction and just by his presence that she nearly breaks the deception right there on the spot. She starts to confess, Paul, no, I'm so sorry, but I'm not.
But he cuts her off. Paul interrupts her, drawn instantly to the sound of the name Lucinda. He stops her in the act, and he offers immediate, complete forgiveness, believing she has returned exactly as he promised she would. He just holds her and showers her with tenderness.
This is the critical moment. And Tessa chooses happiness, even if it is secondhand love meant for Lucinda.
She accepts the mantle of the golden goddess. She decides she can carry out the deception, promising to be his eyes and to smooth his way through life. And this is the peak of her emotional euphoria. She really believes the lie has succeeded and that Paul's inherent goodness guarantees their perfect, devoted future.
But can a happiness built on a foundation of sand truly hold?
We know the answer is no, because right at this peak, the first major crack appears, and it's delivered in a letter from her father. And her father, having lived in Greece, he knows Paul's darker side intimately.
He expresses his profound disbelief at Paul's quick forgiveness. He calls it suspicious. And he articulates the core thematic foreshadowing of the entire narrative.
He does. He notes Paul's inherent streak of primitive cruelty that lies just beneath the veneer of Western culture he had acquired.
The father is explicit. He says he could more easily have seen his as the merciless avenger, devising some fiendish plot to punish Lucinda.
That is a stark warning. He's saying Paul is capable of profound, long-term malice. The man who was once the sacrificial victim is also capable of becoming the cruel tyrant.
And Tessa, who's basking in her honeymoon glow and the perceived goodness of Paul, she just dismisses this warning immediately. She views revenge as impossible for him.
But for you, the listener, this is the signpost. The switch is about to flip. The father's insight is going to prove tragically, horribly precise. And now we enter the psychological heart of the story. This is where Paul's slow-burn revenge begins to manifest. And it is the transition from absolute bliss to abject terror, confirming every single fear her father had articulated.
The narrative tension here is just masterful because the cruelty is so subtle at first. It's built entirely on systematic psychological warfare. Paul, believing he has the woman who ruined his life back in his clutches, begins meticulously testing, isolating, and humiliating her.
Right, he's forcing her to confront Lucinda's vanity and his own vulnerability. And let's look at the coffee incident, which is just classic emotional manipulation.
Okay, set the scene.
So Tessa, being diligent in her role as a caretaker, places his coffee glass on the usual corner of the table so he knows exactly where it is. It's an act of care. But Paul, reaching for it, deliberately shifts his aim, spills the hot coffee all over his clothes, and then immediately weaponizes the accident.
He snaps, "You clumsy girl," and then, even more cuttingly, Must you insist on carrying me about as if I were a baby?
It's not just impatience, it's a calculated move. He's denying her competence, turning her act of devoted care into a source of guilt. It's designed to make her doubt her own reality and her ability to assist him.
It's textbook gaslighting. It's designed to invoke that cycle of fear, obligation, and guilt. He creates a situation where she feels guilty for a mistake he engineered, which obligates her to try harder, which only increases her fear of upsetting him further.
And the humiliation continues in public, which is even worse. At Bellopegus Abbey, Tessa is describing the beauty of a fire to him, softly.
Just being his eyes, like she promised.
Exactly. And Paul curtly interrupts, making a scene. "Must you shout, Lucinda? There's no need to let the world know I can't see." He rejects her gentle help by feigning this deep embarrassment, suggesting her devotion is actually drawing unwanted attention to his disability and thereby shaming her.
The goal there is isolation. If he can make her feel ashamed of helping him publicly, she'll eventually stop.
And if she stops, she becomes less connected to the outside world and more dependent on his presence and his approval. It just deepens the trap.
The car incident is maybe the most egregious example of psychological destabilization.
Oh, it's awful. Paul had complimented her driving earlier in the honeymoon phase, but when she is forced to make an emergency stop because a child runs into the road, a necessary safety measure, he just erupts. He unleashes an angry tirade, making her so nervous that she's all shaking and feels compelled to apologize for her competence.
For saving a child's life, basically.
It is pure emotional abuse designed to erode her confidence in the real world. Paul is forcing her to feel that she cannot trust her own judgment, making her entirely reliant on his instructions, even when he can't see the road. He's deliberately creating a hyper-anxious state in her.
And the verbal shifts are horrifying. Paul begins making these chilling philosophical statements that directly threaten the woman he believes he has trapped.
In Famagusta, he discusses the brutal historical torture of a man named Bragadino. And then, completely out of nowhere, he declares, any punishment that comes to a woman is usually well-deserved.
Which is terrifying, especially since Tessa knows that Paul is fully aware of what Lucinda did to him. He's not just talking about history. He is articulating his current belief system. He's warning her.
And the tenderness he showed initially just gives way to this dark, possessive ownership. "Show me how much, my worshipful Lucinda, my beautiful wife whom I cannot see." He constantly demands confirmation of her devotion, turning her love into a performance he can command and judge.
So Tessa, driven by terror and confusion, she finally breaks and questions this drastic, cruel change in his mood.
And that's when he drops the facade. He confirms her father's dire intuition. "I married you for the sole purpose of revenge. I meant to pay you back."
He gloats. He actually gloats, stating that Lucinda's vanity sickens me and that he always intended to delay the final blow for a long, long time.
Tessa realizes the extent of the mental torture and she cries out, "Paul, you're crucifying me." And you feel it. The man she loves hates the woman she is pretending to be, and she is willingly enduring that hatred for a crime she didn't commit.
And Paul confirms her devotion is his weapon. He says, "Your love is my weapon, and by God, I'll exploit it to the full. I'll make you writhe, I'll hear you cry out for mercy, and only then will you know the real depth of my hatred for you."
He's consciously using the thing Tessa craves, his attention and his heart, as a tool to inflict the maximum emotional pain.
But wait, I have to ask, if he is so consumed by revenge, why did he even marry her? Why not just send her away?
Because that wouldn't satisfy the merciless avenger his father described. Lucinda's crime was vanity and independence, so the punishment, in his mind, must be humiliation and total subordination. By marrying her, he legally and emotionally ensnares her. He believes he's punishing Lucinda by making her serve him blindly, denying her the audience her beauty demands, and making her dependent on the very man she scorned. It's revenge conceived as a life sentence.
So the narrative takes this incredible turn here. Just when we think the conflict is settled, Tessa is trapped in Paul's revenge. A new mystery emerges. The possibility that Paul is not actually blind, which turns the entire plot into this complex double deception.
This is where the psychological thriller aspect really takes over, you know? Tessa starts noticing these inexplicable physical symptoms. Paul begins wearing dark glasses, complaining of severe headaches, and visibly shading his eyes against the intense Cyprus sun.
Which are all classic symptoms suggesting photophobia or light sensitivity.
Exactly. Which often precedes the return of sight. He also makes a trip to the chemist for medicine, suggesting he's managing pain related to his eyes, rather than just treating a permanent condition. Tessa begins to wonder if his vision might be returning and if that is causing him physical pain, which could explain some of his extreme irritability.
This suspicion then accelerates with the return of Paul's friend, Joe.
Right, and Joe remains completely unaware of Tessa's true identity or Paul's revenge plot. Joe brings up the medical context. Paul's blindness was psychosomatic, caused by shock, meaning it might be reversible through special treatment or surgery. And then he drops the name of the specialist, Mr. John Reed.
And Tessa's reaction is immediate and desperate. When Joe suggests pursuing the treatment, she refuses. She fiercely clings to her marriage and her secret.
Of course she does. She knows that if Paul regains his sight, the deception is instantly over, and she will be cast off, doubly hated for the lie and for being the less beautiful sister.
But then we get the definitive smoking gun incident.
The snake incident, yes. While they are watching this beautiful sunset on the roof terrace, a 3-foot snake appears.
And Tessa, motivated by pure, selfless fear for Paul, she intervenes. She doesn't even think about her own safety.
And Joe, who had been nearby, witnesses the whole thing. Later, when Tessa tries to downplay the event, claiming she panicked over a tiny thing, Joe corrects her precisely. About 3 feet long, and a nasty-looking brute.
And then he asks the question.
And immediately after, Joe turns to Tessa and delivers the most loaded question of the entire saga. Have you ever suspected that he can see?
That question changes everything. We realize, and Tessa realizes, that Paul has been subtly testing her all along, revealing a knowledge that completely contradicts his blindness.
Like when they are out walking, Tessa points out 2 lizards, a gecko and a tree lizard. Paul identifies them accurately, and when she asks if he can see them, he replies, "Yes, darling, I can see it," before correcting himself to imply he only sees it in his memory.
But these slips, they become more pronounced and more intimate. When she describes the moon and the sunset, he responds with his intimate knowledge, saying, "I can see it all quite plainly, it's disturbing." He confirms that the specific sapphire glow she sees is exactly right, something she hadn't explicitly articulated, yet he confirms it.
He is seeing the landscape, but he's framing it as an internal experience.
The most physical contradiction revolves around her appearance.
Right. It does. He feels her bikini and immediately notices the difference in texture and style. He says, "This isn't the one you usually wear." Lucinda was fiercely attached to her routines and possessions. Paul, even if blind, would have intimate knowledge of her habits, and Tessa's appearance constantly contradicted that memory.
This realization that Paul is aware leads to active distrust on his part. He demands to read her personal letter to her father,
which confirms his suspicion. And Tessa is forced to perform this incredible feat of evasive reading, skipping details, struggling to maintain the illusion of familiarity with Lucinda's handwriting. She tries to cover by admitting she's having difficulty in reading my own scrawl, which is just this pathetic excuse that only deepens Paul's certainty.
So Paul is no longer just punishing Lucinda. He's trying to uncover the identity of the woman who has replaced her. And in doing so, he is getting to know the true Tessa.
Exactly. And the pressure on her is enormous. Fueled by Joe's contact with the optimistic specialist, Mr. John Reed, Tessa reaches her breaking point. Convinced Paul will feel doubly hateful toward her once he sees her, she chooses flight over confrontation. She applies for a teaching post in Hong Kong, intending to disappear before Paul regains his sight and exposes her. The ultimate failure of her lie seems completely inevitable.
So the climax arrives, not in some sterilized hospital room, but in the familiar domestic chaos of Tessa's childhood home in England.
It's a great choice. Paul, who was scheduled for his final bandage removal, arrives completely unexpectedly while Tessa is frantically packing her life into tea chests for her escape to Hong Kong.
Tessa's mother attempts to stall him, desperate to protect her daughter, but Paul just insists on seeing his wife. And then, in this moment of extreme dramatic tension, Paul removes his dark glasses.
And his sight is fully restored.
The sight of his cured eyes, combined with the guilt, it's just too much. Tessa, surrounded by the physical evidence of her impending flight, immediately confesses, "Oh, Paul, I'm not Lucinda."
But the true shock is Paul's calm, immediate reply. "I can see you're not Lucinda."
He knew.
He reveals he has known for months. He'd already distinguished between the 2 women. The irony is just staggering. Tessa didn't fail in her deception. Paul allowed it to continue because he was conducting a different kind of test, a test of character.
And he systematically outlines the sequence of clues that gave her away, proving that his sight, or at least his acute perceptive abilities, had been returning long before the official removal of the bandages.
The first doubt, he says, came with the handwriting. When he forced her to read Lucinda's letter, he was confused by her struggle to read her own handwriting. Then there was her voice.
He noticed her voice.
He noted that her musical voice was different from Lucinda's, specifically saying, "Your voice is like music, Lucinda. I never noticed this before." This shows a real shift in his perception and a growing realization of Tessa's inherent quality.
And the physical exploration he often performed, which Tessa mistook for a blind man's sensitivity, that was Paul gathering evidence.
Completely. He repeatedly felt her face, noticing the difference in features, specifically the difference in her snub little nose, which Lucinda did not possess.
But the definitive, undeniable proof of character over appearance was the snake.
The snake. Paul revealed that Lucinda was terrified of snakes. She would scream and run from a harmless grass snake and had abandoned a picnic over another tiny one.
But
Tessa risked her safety and confronted the 3-foot snake out of fear for him.
that selfless, fearless act confirmed she was not the self-obsessed Lucinda. The sister he loved when he was physically blind would have run. The woman standing before him, motivated purely by devotion, stayed.
And Paul's final confession reveals the truth of his heart and why the torture stopped feeling like revenge and started feeling like torment for himself. He admits his hatred was focused solely on Lucinda, but his initial suspicion and hatred for Tessa's deception, it soon evolved into love.
He was struggling with intense inner conflict.
He was fighting against his growing love for Tessa while trying to continue this cruel revenge plot that was intended for Lucinda.
So, the psychological torture she endured was actually driven by Paul's inability to reconcile his intense, hateful commitment to vengeance with the profound, overwhelming love he was developing for the woman embodying the victim.
His revenge plot became self-destructive once he fell in love with Tessa. He realized his actions were evil, and he affirms Tessa's superior goodness. "I was even more blind then, for I couldn't distinguish between the gold and the dross."
He was emotionally blind in his pursuit of Lucinda, focusing only on superficial beauty, the dross, and ignoring the real value of Tessa, the gold.
Exactly. And he reveals his motivation for continuing the deceit wasn't spite, it was fear. He was afraid to reveal his knowledge that he could see or that he knew the truth of her identity because he feared she would feel so guilty and embarrassed that she would leave him. He was trying to test her, to provoke a confession, but ultimately he was trying to keep her.
He even admits he had hoped she would confess on her own, recalling the strange expectancy in his manner during her last hospital visit.
The redemption is complete. He affirms his passion and possessiveness for her. The true Tessa saying he would follow her to the ends of the earth and beyond. He learned that the character she possessed was infinitely more valuable than the beauty he once adored.
What a monumental saga of emotional warfare, mistaken identity, and eventual hard-won redemption. We started with Tessa's lie born of devotion, leading to a marriage forged in Paul's burning desire for vengeance, and ending with redemption achieved through the purification of mutual suffering.
Tessa, by willingly enduring Lucinda's planned punishment, she revealed her own superior, selfless character. She entered the marriage believing she was sacrificing her identity. She left having validated her true self and finally earning the devotion Paul had originally dedicated to her sister.
She proved that selfless love can overcome even the most intense, deeply held hatred.
It's a powerful insight, isn't it, into the complexities of human emotion. That extreme love and extreme hatred can exist in such close proximity that they feed off of each other. Paul's primitive cruelty, which his father had warned about, was ultimately defeated not by Tessa confronting him, but by her quiet, selfless devotion that managed to penetrate his self-imposed darkness.
And this journey of introspection was forced upon him. His initial love for Lucinda was based purely on superficial appearance, the dross. It took physical blindness, followed by the enforced solitude of Cyprus, to cure his emotional blindness.
Right. He was forced to rely on non-visual, perceptive data, voice, touch, reaction to fear, to truly see Tessa's character.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. Tessa's father, who understood Paul's background, warned that he was capable of being a merciless avenger. Paul, realizing the truth about his actions, confirmed this dark assessment of his character. This raises a crucial question for the entire saga. If Paul hadn't been physically blinded by shock in that terrible accident, would he ever have been forced into the solitude and introspection necessary to distinguish between Lucinda's superficial beauty and Tessa's inner gold?
You know, the physical trauma inadvertently became the essential forge in which true love, the kind based on character and not sight, was finally crafted. Think about that. How often a devastating setback, even one born of someone else's malice, is required for a complete necessary shift in our perspective on what true value looks like.